Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be reading stories from the Reddit thread called Who's the Absolute Most Disturbing Person You've Ever Met? If you enjoyed these stories, please like and subscribe. And if you want more stories like that, leave a comment on what you would like to see next. I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you. I had two roommates in college. I wasn't particularly close to either of them, but we came from the same town. One of them had a younger brother, and she asked me if he could spend the night on our couch for a night or two. Not great, but I didn't complain. I can't explain it, but he was so creepy. There was a deadness to his eyes, and he hardly spoke. I was very glad when he was gone. A few years later, I found out how creepy he really was. Apparently, his parents kicked him out because he had been stealing from them, but he came back and made a hiding place in the garage and would stay there. I guess he cleared it up during the day because they had no idea how long he was doing that. Anyway, he broke into the house next door. Simple burglary would be bad enough, but no. He hung out for hours and waited for the lady homeowner to come home. He murdered her with an axe. He was captured not long after, driving her car. He was executed a few years later. The whole story really wasn't a surprise. He was the most evil I've ever been next to, and I knew something was off about him long before it happened. Was on a rotation at State Psych Hospital. I met a man who had severe psychosis from schizophrenia. He was only diagnosed after his father walked in on the son in the bathtub, actively eating the mother's intestines, covered in her blood. He was heavily medicated and completely chemically subdued when I met him at a group session I was observing. He was unsettling. A man used to follow me home from school when I was 15. He made my skin crawl, and I always made sure I was never alone, because he would be waiting at the bus stop no matter what time I passed it, even if I'd had detention. He would just stand there until I walked past, then walk behind me very closely all the way home, occasionally calling me pretty or asking if he could take me out. Thank God for my mates being extra protective, because when I was 18, he was convicted of the murder of a 17-year-old girl he'd been seeing who, when the picture was printed in the paper, was eerily very similar looking to me. A man used to do the same thing to my aunt. He would slowly follow my aunt in his car while he gratified himself. Neighborhood kids told my grandfather, and after a week or so, they set a trap for him. My grandfather, a large man, an FDNY and World War II vet, pulled him out of the car and tactically extracted several of the man's teeth with his rather large fists. Turns out the man was on the school board. All the neighbors told the cops that the creep had swung first. My father and oldest sister. He is so charismatic, charming, funny, hardworking. He rubs elbows with people in power and teaches children's classes at the church. Pretends to be a very sensitive single father. He's a rapist, pedophile, an absolute terrorist. He believes that women and animals exist to serve men, literally. He would regularly choke me while describing how he wanted to kill me. Speed while jerking the car around and screaming that he'd wreck to kill us both. The very moment somebody else was present, he was a smiling, soft-spoken, kind man. Super bizarre to grow up around. I used to work in the law courts and saw plenty of interesting and not very nice characters. Had to sit on a few awful inquests. Had to sit on an absolutely grub of a junkie who was charged with shaking his ex-girlfriend's baby until the brain damage was so severe it died. But there's one kid that sticks with me. Mondays were allocated for children's court, usually teenage kids appearing for things like theft, vandalism, etc. A lot of these kids were quite clearly from backgrounds of low income and neglect. This kid turned up in a private school uniform, blazer, tie, and polished shoes, with his parents that were dressed immaculately. The school on the kid's uniform was a quite prestigious one, ridiculously high fees. He looked no older than 16, blonde baby face with glasses, looked entirely out of place amongst the scruffy other teens in the tracksuits. I was inside the courtroom when this kid appeared, and just wow. The other kids that morning had been charged with things like shoplifting, a few were in trouble for graffiti, etc. This kid, who looked so innocent and quiet, had attempted to force himself on not one, but two girls at a school camp. He had waited until everyone was asleep, and then when the first girl had left her shared room to go to the bathrooms down the hall, he had dragged her into a cupboard and assaulted her. She had managed to fight him off and then run away to wake a teacher. The teacher found him with his hands around the throat of the second girl. When I worked in a supermarket as a cashier, there was one regular customer who looked and behaved like the picture you'd see in a dictionary next to pervert. You know how they always say most predators look like nice everyday people? He did not. He always made a point to come through my till and tell me I was pretty, or ask me if I had a boyfriend, hinting that he'd like to do things to me, if I was your boyfriend. After I'd served him, he would just stand at the end of my till and stare at me. Sometimes he'd stand outside the plate glass windows at the front and stare at me. Just to put some extra creepy context on it, I was 19 at the time, but I was often mistaken for being much, much younger. I told management, but of course, they wouldn't do anything about it because they only had my word. Then he started following one of the female managers around the supermarket and was promptly banned. One time he was outside staring at me again, and one of the other cashiers recognized him as a man who lived on her road. He'd recently been released from prison, where he'd been serving time for raping his own daughter. I lived in a shelter for a year, and I saw tons of creepy people. The one that sticks out was this 19-year-old who was convicted of sexual assault. 90% of the time, he seemed like a nice dude, except when he talked about women. He told the story of how he got arrested, and it was so clear he was very guilty, but he didn't get it. And he was still trying to talk to 16-year-olds over Snapchat while he was there. We all told him it was a bad idea, but he didn't care. What made him creepy is he just seemed like a relatively normal guy who had a drug problem like myself, but he had no regard or respect for women. I'm almost certain that this guy will offend again. He wasn't the only person I'd met there who had sexually assaulted somebody, by the way. He was just the creepiest about it. Being homeless sucks. An ICU patient of mine who was recovering from surgery. I was making small talk, and he gleefully told me the story of how he, in a bout of rage, ran down a motorcyclist, and he left him for dead on a small country highway in our state. He told me this with zero remorse, just casually, as if it was nothing. Spent a year couch surfing after I got kicked out at 19. One place I ended up was an acquaintance of mine's nearly condemned trailer, and this place really attracted some scum of the town. Unfortunately, I had no other place to stay at the time. I had a 2-liter of my soda in the back of the fridge, put my name on it, and please do not touch written on it. As silly as it sounds, it was a comfort to me to just have one thing that was mine, and also a treat that I would sip on whenever I just needed a little escape. I didn't mind if my roomies drank it, really, but the main guy of this place always had people over that were complete strangers or weirdos to me, and I didn't want them drinking my soda, especially straight out of the bottle. I woke up one day to basically half a cup of soda left in the bottle. It had nearly been full the night before. I got sad and asked, "Hey, who drank my Dr. Pepper?" Everyone told me it was this guy that I'll call KT. KT was a very strange kid. He was either my age or a year younger than me, and he had kind of a bad reputation for stealing drugs and all kinds of things. I didn't confront him because frankly he freaked me out, and I came to the conclusion that it wasn't worth further discomfort over some Dr. Pepper. A few weeks later, KT's best friend, I'll call him C, went missing during our county fair. C was a great kid, good friends with my brother, and got along with everyone. KT was going around town bragging that C was dead and that he was responsible. It turned out to be true. KT killed C over drugs and about $300. His body was found chopped up and burned in the woods not far out of town. The fact that I was in the presence of this kid only about a month before he killed his own best friend still keeps me up at night. Our town misses C a lot, and there have been a lot of violence here since then. KT will thankfully spend the rest of his life in prison, along with 3 accomplices.